Having some major technical difficulties this evening. So I'm just going to get this record played and on the air here. I'm your host, the ghost of Vincent Price, here in Dr. Durant's Sanctum. This is not Sunday. It's no longer Monday either, or Veterans Day, which was the reason for playing this G.I. Joe record. It's now Tuesday. But somewhere in the country or in the world, it could possibly still be Monday. So those of you that are over on the West Coast, so to speak, celebrate your Veterans Day by listening to this little record here in Dr. Durant's Sanctum. Hanna-Barbera, yes, the cartoon people, they made records back then. And somehow they got the rights to do G.I. Joe. And this is G.I. Joe, Stories of Patriotic Americans, the story of the Green Beret. So sit back, listen, and enjoy this Sanctum story time. Jody, spin the record.
Fighting soldiers from the sky, fearless men who jump and die, men who mean just what they say, the brave men of the Green Beret, silver wings upon their chests. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test today, but only 3 win the Green Beret. Trained to live off nature's land, trained to combat hand to hand, men who fight by night and day, courage take from the Green Beret, silver wings upon their chests. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test today, but only 3 win the Green Beret. Back at home, a young wife waits. Green Beret has met his fate. He has died for those oppressed, leaving her this last request. Put silver wings on my son's chest. Make him one of America's best. He'll be a man they'll test one day. Have him win the Green Beret.
At one of America's largest army posts, the commanding officer, Colonel Pat Lawrence, is hard at work on his pet project, writing a column for the official Post newspaper. Oh, Sergeant?
Yes, sir, Colonel Lawrence?
Here's the copy for my column. Rush it right over to the printing office, will you?
Right away, sir. Will that be all, sir?
Well, that's all for today, Sergeant. I've got to go pack my gear now. I'm flying down to Fort Bragg tonight.
Fort Bragg? Well, then I'd better tell those boys they won't be able to see you today.
Boys?
Yes, sir. A youngster about 8 named Andy, and one about 12 named George. Been waiting about an hour, sir.
Oh, Andy and George. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Sergeant? They're friends of mine.
Friends, sir?
Oh, yeah. Andy and George are a couple of fine youngsters. Show them in.
Right away, sir. Colonel Lawrence says you can come in now.
Well, if it isn't my old, young friends, Andy and George. What can I do for you, men?
Colonel Lawrence, we've got a problem. We'd like to talk to him.
At ease, men. Relax. Now, suppose you start at the beginning and tell me what this is all about, huh?
You tell him, George. You're the oldest.
Well, you see, sir, we've been getting into a lot of, arguments lately.
Not real bad arguments, sir, but an awful lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, just what are all these arguments about, men?
The Green Beret.
Oh, the Green Beret.
Yes, sir. Andy says he's going to join the Green Beret.
I am, too. You'll see.
But Colonel, Andy's only 8 years old.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being 8 years old that a little time won't take care of.
Oh, but that's not the worst part of it, Colonel. Andy couldn't be a Green Beret for a lot of reasons.
Oh? What kind of reasons, George?
Well, I've been reading a lot about the men of the Green Beret, and just anybody can't be a Green Beret.
But I'm not a just anybody. I'm Andy, and I can learn to be a Green Beret.
You see my problem, sir? Andy just doesn't realize that only special people can join the Green Beret.
Special people?
Well, sure. I read where you can't be a Green Beret unless you're a radio expert and a karate expert and know how to be a doctor and speak 2 or 3 foreign languages and a lot of other things. And Andy isn't even out of grammar school.
I will be someday when I get big.
Well, men, I'm afraid there's a lot you don't know about the fighting men of the Green Beret.
We'd sure like to know all about them, Colonel.
Especially me, sir.
Well, make yourselves comfortable, men, and I'll tell you the story of the Green Beret. Way back in the 1750s, that's over 200 years ago, a rugged band of American frontier militiamen called Rogers Rangers waged guerrilla warfare against the French and Indians. Rogers Rangers wore green hats, the same color as the trees in the forest.
So the enemy couldn't see them very easy.
Right. Now, those early Green Berets helped camouflage the Americans in the French and Indian War. During World War II, Green Berets were worn by the heroic British commandos. The colorful berets were also worn by several other units of Free World Rangers and paratroopers. And today, the jaunty green cap has become a worldwide symbol of the finest fighting men on Earth. It means that the wearer is a Special Forces man.
What are the Special Forces, Colonel?
Well, methods and techniques of warfare change constantly, you know. Those who have the responsibility of protecting America's freedom must constantly find newer and better ways to combat those who would destroy our way of life. Since the enemies of democracy are constantly developing new methods of warfare, America had to develop a new kind of G.I. Joe to protect our security. So in 1952, the United States created a special school at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to teach our fighting men psychological warfare.
What's a you know, that kind of warfare?
Well, you might say it means winning a war by using your brains as well as guns. You outthink the enemy.
You see, Andy, I told you gotta be real smart to be a good soldier.
When John F. Kennedy was president, he realized that America must create a new breed of G.I. Joe with many new skills and new techniques. So he worked hard to help develop the new branch of our armed forces to teach our fighting men the new science of special warfare.
Are these special warfare soldiers the same as the Green Beret, Colonel?
Yes, they are, George. The men of this elite group of highly trained specialists chose to wear the Green Beret as a special symbol of the finest freedom fighters on Earth. At first, the Army wouldn't give the Special Warfare Unit official permission to wear the Green Beret. But in 1961, President Kennedy visited the United States Special Warfare Center at Fort Bragg and was met by Special Forces troops wearing the jaunty Green Berets as their special badge of honor. Kennedy, who was a great admirer of these special fighting men, was very pleased at the sight of the colorful Green Beret. And he told the men,
"You must wear the Green Beret proudly. It will be a mark of distinction and a badge of courage in the difficult days ahead."
President Kennedy's words helped to make the Green Beret the official symbol of the Special Forces soldier.
Well, how old do you have to get to be a Green Beret, Colonel?
And what do you have to do to join, sir?
Well, I haven't got time to tell you now. I'm flying down to Fort Bragg tonight on business. Say, how'd you like to visit the school where they train the Green Berets?
Oh, boy, well, we'll have to ask our mothers.
Well, I'll call them right now. Meantime, you fellows had better run home and get your toothbrushes. The helicopter leaves in an hour.
Right away, sir. And thanks. Hey, come on, Andy.
Bye, Colonel.
Bye, men, and carry on.
Boy, traveling by helicopter's like riding on a flying carpet.
Better.
Well, yes, George, in a way. That's the United States Army John F. Kennedy Center for Special Warfare.
Where they train the Green Berets?
Right. Fasten your seatbelts now. We're going to land in a minute.
Fasten your seatbelt, Andy.
It's been fastened since we took off.
Welcome to the center, Colonel Lawrence. Well, who are these two young men? New recruits?
Well, not today, Major. But they just might be wearing a green beret in a few years. This is Andy.
Pleased to meet you, Major.
And George.
Pleased to meet you, sir.
They're a couple of friends of mine. They were asking about the Special Forces, and since I was coming down here on business, I thought they might like to visit Kennedy Center and see for themselves what it takes to be a Green Beret.
Good idea, Colonel. Glad to have Andy and George with us. Would you like me to show them around?
Oh, thanks, Major, but I can give them a tour. I know you're busy.
Okay, Colonel. I'll be in my office when you get through.
Colonel, what was that?
Oh, it sounded like a big explosion.
It was. Every Green Beret has to be an expert in demolition.
Demolition?
Yes. Here our soldiers are taught how to handle all kinds of explosives, how to blow up enemy bridges, refineries, dams, and also how to use explosives for peaceful purposes, like building roads.
Hit the dirt, Colonel!
Nothing to worry about, men. Just a class in weaponry. Here, the trainees take an 8-week course in the use of 30 different kinds of weapons, from the M1 rifle to the 81 millimeter mortar. They're setting up some mortars now. Let's watch.
Wow, sounds like a real war.
When those G.I. Joes complete this course, they'll know all there is to know about every kind of weapon, even English, German, Russian, and Chinese weapons. And they have to know how to take them apart and put them back together again, blindfolded.
Colonel, look! There's a fight!
Well, not really, George. Just a couple of G.I. Joes practicing some rough and tough karate. Every Green Beret has to be an expert at judo, karate, boxing, wrestling, and their own special brand of hand-to-hand combat. It may save their lives someday.
Boy, you sure have to know a lot to be a Green Beret, huh, Colonel?
Well, what you've seen is only a very small part of the training it takes to become a Green Beret. These Special Forces men must become experts in guerrilla warfare, in parachute jumping, radio communications, photography, mountain climbing, scuba diving, medicine, and all the skills and sciences of today's modern warfare. And they must be able to teach these skills to others. Besides that, each man must speak 2 or more languages.
Boy, I'm still trying to learn to speak good English.
I know who they are. They're paratroopers. I can tell by the paratrooper boots.
Good observation, Andy. Every Green Beret has to be a paratrooper, ready to be dropped into trouble spots around the globe, wherever they're needed.
Look, Colonel, they're boarding a plane. Maybe they're going up for a jump.
Right, George. They make practice jumps regularly.
There they go, George.
I wonder where they're going to jump, Colonel.
Well, they'll probably fly over fairly low and try to parachute into that target area over there.
What if they miss, Colonel?
A paratrooper can't miss. He's got to be right every jump, or else.
Look, George, they're flying over the target now.
They're sure flying low.
Airborne troopers are trained to jump at very low altitudes.
There goes the first jump. Geronimo!
Boy, he's falling like a rock.
Not for long. You can see a chute opening already.
George, look! The sky is full of airplanes.
More paratroopers.
They're practicing a mass jump, men. In wartime, whole armies could be dropped silently behind enemy lines.
Wow, that must take a lot of nerve to jump out of a plane like that.
Right. It takes a big man to wear the Green Beret.
I'll be big someday. When I get big.
Oh, Andy. Colonel Lawrence doesn't mean that kind of big.
No, Andy, I meant big in courage. This new breed of modern, highly trained experts in the art of special warfare are very special men, dedicated to protect American security and defend freedom throughout the world.
You think Andy and I might have a chance to be a Green Beret when we grow up, Colonel?
Why not? Anyone with courage, intelligence, strength, and determination, and a strong desire to serve his country, anyone has a chance.
What do you have to do, Colonel?
Well, first you have to join the Army and complete basic training.
Then what?
Then you have to apply for a tryout with the U.S. Army Rangers.
Oh, that's like commandos, isn't it, Colonel?
Right. And if you make it as a Ranger, you can request to be sent to the Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia, where you learn to be a paratrooper.
That's what I want to be, a paratrooper.
If you make it and become jump qualified, you can ask to try out for Special Forces.
The Green Beret.
And if your request is granted, you'll be sent right here to Fort Bragg, where you'll go through the most rigorous and most thorough training any soldier ever had.
Then you're a Green Beret?
Not always, George. Not every man can make it. But those that do make it become the finest fighting men on Earth.
Captain Donlin is a Green Beret.
Who's Captain Donlin, George?
You don't know? He's the leader of the Green Berets that won the Medal of Honor. I read about it.
I can't read.
Oh, I forgot.
How did he win the Medal of Honor?
Well, there was this big bunch of gorillas.
Gorillas?
Guerrilla fighters, Andy. Jungle fighters. You see, in faraway South Vietnam, American forces are helping the Vietnamese people in their desperate fight for liberty and freedom. So when 9 Vietnamese villages were threatened on all sides by the dreaded enemy, the Viet Cong, a small camp was set up at a place called Nam Dong, far into Viet Cong territory. A team of 12 men of the Green Beret, under the command of Captain Roger H.C. Donlin, was sent to the jungle outpost to help the South Vietnamese hold off the Viet Cong who were threatening the villages. The camp was patrolled night and day because a full battalion of the Viet Cong were hiding in the dense jungle surrounding Nam Dong. It was quieter than usual the night of July 6th, 1964. But it was an uneasy kind of quiet, until the young captain noticed that the dogs were getting restless. But before the captain could investigate, mortar fire had blasted the camp's mess hall into burning rubble. The enemy Kong had hit. That first explosion knocked the captain off his feet, but he staggered to the command post, where he and others of his A-team dragged weapons and ammunition out of the burning building. In the communications room, Staff Sergeant Daniels was trying to radio for help.
Hello, Da Nang. Hello, Da Nang. Nam Dong calling. Nam Dong calling. I have an operations immediate message. Repeat, operations immediate.
Roger. Go ahead, Nam Dong.
We are under heavy mortar fire. Repeat, heavy mortar fire. Request flare ship and airstrike.
But at that moment, a mortar shell hit the room next to communications, and the sergeant grabbed his M16 and dashed for the door, just as another VC shell got communications. Before Sergeant Daniels could get an answer.
Jody, quick! Turn the record over. I need to find out what happens to these Green Berets. You know, I have a favorite beret. It's a plum beret. I like to wear it when I go out to buy a baguette. Not when I'm holding down a fortress in Dam Nong. And now, the second half of the Green Berets.
The enemy was stepping up his surprise attack, but the Special Forces men grabbed whatever arms they could find in the burning buildings and went into action. Sergeant Thurman Brown raced to his 81 millimeter mortar, but But as he neared his weapon, a 57mm shell exploded against a wall a few feet away and hurled the sergeant into the air. But Brown, still hanging onto his rifle, dashed back into a burning building to get a supply of hand grenades. With an armful of grenades, the sergeant dashed back to his mortar bunker, only to find himself looking down the barrel of a Kong submachine gun. The quick-thinking sergeant raised his rifle and dropped the VC in his tracks. The sergeant called out,
Fire the illumination flares! Fire the illumination flares!
And boxes of shells with flares were broken open. Hurrying back to his mortar to fire the illumination flares, the sergeant ran into a burst of enemy fire and was wounded, but made it onto his bunker and started firing illumination shells so his buddies could see the attacking Kong. In less than 5 minutes, this brave Green Beret had fought a fire, narrowly escaped death from enemy fire, shot 2 VC, and lit up the surrounding jungles with flares so that his team would have a fighting chance to survive. Surrounding the tiny camp were 900 Viet Cong guerrillas. And as they moved in on the Americans, many of them had broken through the outer defenses of Nam Dong. But they were met by a grim and fierce group of Green Berets who fought back with everything they could find. M16s, smoke grenades, M79 grenade launchers, and 81mm mortars. In the fierce fighting, the medics were kept busy taking care of the wounded Americans. Captain Donlin, busy shouting orders to his men, was blown into the air when a VC mortar shell hit. But the valiant captain, still dizzy from concussion, picked himself off the ground and continued to fight. Somewhere in the dark, the captain heard one of his men yell,
They're over here, in the ammo bunker!
He ran toward the bunker. But another mortar shell exploded close to the captain and knocked him down, so hard it blew one of his boots off. Still dazed, Captain Donlin grabbed his M16 and started crawling to the nearest bunker. And by the light of the burning buildings, he spotted 3 Viet Cong that had already slipped through the main gate. Donlin called out, Illuminate the main gate! And by the light of a flare, the captain fired a quick burst from his automatic rifle. And 2 of the Kong dropped to the ground. The 3rd VC started crawling away in the tall grass. But Donlin lobbed a hand grenade. And the enemy crawled no more. By now, Donlin was bleeding from several wounds. But he was too busy fighting to take time out for medical attention. Somewhere in the darkness, one of Donlin's men cried out,
I've been hit!
But the sound of English only brought heavier fire from the enemy. One of the Green Beret, with his left arm hanging limply from his side, kept firing his M16 with his one good arm, and occasionally pulling the pin on a grenade with his teeth to score direct hits on the enemy. Suddenly, from out of the tall grass surrounding the outpost, 100 Viet Cong rushed the badly outnumbered Americans. But the men of the Green Beret fought back like wounded tigers. And the first wave of VC fell back into the jungle. After a long, long hour of heavy fighting, the airstrike requested by the defenders of Nam Dong had not arrived. There were many casualties among the Green Beret, but they fought on with grim determination. They were holding their own with the VC when suddenly an enemy mortar shell made a direct hit on the supply room, destroying needed guns and ammunition, and knocking Captain Donlin down for the 4th time, leaving him with shrapnel wounds on his left leg. Finally, the Kong troops broke through the camp's outer defenses and were hammering the inner defenses with hand grenades. As the VC closed in, the Green Beret prepared to fight hand to hand. Captain Donlin, bleeding badly from multiple wounds, grabbed a 60mm mortar and was moving toward the approaching enemy when a stun grenade exploded nearby, ripping his leg again with shrapnel. By now, only 10 of the Green Beret were alive. Many were wounded, and the airstrike they had asked for had not arrived. Perhaps their message was not received. Their only hope was to try to hold out until dawn, until they could see the enemy by daylight. After hours of fierce fighting, the Kong stopped firing. For a minute or so, there was an eerie silence. Then, from out of the jungles, came a man's voice shouting,
Lay down weapons! Viet Cong going to take camp! All will be killed!
But as the voice from the loudspeaker kept demanding that the Americans surrender, one of the Green Berets zeroed in on the spot the sound was coming from with a mortar.
Lay down your weapons! Lay down your weapons! We are going to annihilate your camp! You will all be killed!
By now, the mortar had a fix on the VC voice, and the loudspeaker went dead. But the determined Kong launched a new attack with 60-millimeter mortars. This time, the Kong were inside the camp, and the men of the Green Beret were fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds, when they were cheered by the sound of aircraft in the distance. As the U.S. planes started dropping flares, the Viet Cong knew that an airstrike would follow, so they began to withdraw into the dense jungle. After 3 hours of desperate fighting, daylight brought an end to the battle for Nam Dong. For their valiant defense of an important outpost of freedom, the men of Detachment A-726 of the 7th Special Forces Group became the most decorated team in the history of the Green Beret. Master Sergeant Gabriel Alamo and Sergeant John Houston were awarded the Distinguished Service Cross posthumously. Silver Stars were awarded to Lieutenant Julian Olenichuk, Sergeant Thurman Brown, Sergeant Michael Disser, and Sergeant Terrence Terran. Bronze Stars with V for Valor were awarded to Sergeant Vernon Beeson, Sergeant Keith Daniels, Sergeant Thomas Gregg, Staff Sergeant Raymond Witzel, and Staff Sergeant Merwin Woods. And all but 3 of Company A-726 received Purple Hearts. The courageous commanding officer who led his Green Berets in defending that outpost of freedom was awarded America's highest honor. December 5th, 1965, the President of the United States awarded Captain Roger H.C. Donlin the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Captain Donlin's conspicuous gallantry and extraordinary heroism at the risk of his own life above and beyond the call of duty are in the highest traditions of the United States Army and reflect great credit on himself and the armed forces of his country.
Gee, Colonel, those Green Berets are terrific.
That's why I want to be a Green Beret when I grow up.
Well, no doubt you'll make it, Andy, with a determination like yours. Of course, I hope the world will be at peace by the time you grow up. But as long as our nation's liberty is in danger, we must depend on our G.I. Joes. Our Army, our Navy, our Air Force, and our men of the Green Beret.
Fighting soldiers from the sky. Fearless men who jump and die. Men who mean just what they say. The brave men of the Green Beret, silver wings upon their chests. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test today, but only 3 win the Green Beret. Trained to live off nature's land, trained to combat hand to hand, men who fight by night and day, courage take from the Green Beret, silver wings upon their chest. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test today, but only 3 win the Green Beret. Back at home, a young wife waits. Green Beret has met his fate. He has died for those oppressed, leaving her this last request. Put silver wings on my son's chest. Make him one of America's best. He'll be a man they'll test one day. Have him win the Green Beret.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that sudden Dr. Durant's Sanctum story time on a Tuesday evening. It was not a Sunday or a Monday, as I said. It's well past midnight here, so I thought I'd toss this out there for Veterans Day, in celebration of Veterans Day. There are many brave veterans that fought and died for this country, and it was a good excuse to play this record here. I haven't heard it in years. G.I. Joe. It was from Hanna-Barbera, the cartoon company. They did a whole list of records back in the 60s. Numerous ones here. I've got another one here. I'm not Dr. Durant. I'm clearly Vincent Price, right? That's right, I am. I'm Vincent Price. Dr. Durant has a lot of these records. He's got another one here that's a Johnny Quest 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Jules Verne. Now, I starred in a wonderful Jules Verne picture called The Master of the World. You know who else was in that film with me? One Chuck Bronson. Second time we worked together, we were also in House of Wax. God, that Chuck Bronson was a hell of an actor. But boy, could he really dig into that catering that they'd have on set. That man could eat. Not a very friendly fellow. He's a very sort of kept to himself, quiet guy. But boy, I really wish I had some of his death wish money. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, subbing on Dr. Durant's Sanctum. So, without further ado, enjoy the rest of your Veterans Day, if it's still Monday in your part of the world or the country or wherever you are, and enjoy your early Tuesday if you're in the part of the country that I'm in. Well, have a good evening, good night, goodbye, and God bless. Jody, how do we stop this thing?